More questions?
Well, tell me a bit about how you could see it being used in IAP2.
Well, Lonnie, I guess we're in a bit of a state now with deficit budgeting. I guess it could keep us from getting depressed. Good point. But, maybe more than ever is the time that the board should be using this in updating its strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
And putting actual times and dates to achieving things, and then believing that it can be done.
Mm. And in your own chapter, what sort of application, either for you as individuals or you as a group in your work, can you see some? Tell me about how you might apply some of these techniques.
It's Jan. I'm thinking that we can use it certainly with the board as we go forward. We do have a strategic plan that we keep reviewing, but perhaps this is just taking another step back after we have the AGM and a new board going forward, that we say, okay, let's look. We know things are slowing down in some aspects of the economy that are going to be impacting us. So let's use this as a way to plan for the next few years. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jan.
Well, and
Terry here. One of the things we've done as a chapter, we had hosted 2 of the international conferences. It's sort of always been my thought that maybe it's time again. Maybe it's not a conference, but following the successful Scottsdale Symposium training, kind of low cost housing but high value training in a mountain retreat like Banff. And if we were to think about, 2010, and as a chapter, is this something we could contribute back to the association and, host the AGM again? And using this technology to say, okay, now it's 2011, and we look back on our event last year, something like that. I don't know, it's something I was going to throw out there to the chapter to consider before advancing it, because obviously there has to be internal support before we go that way.
Yeah.
I, for one, am still recovering from the last one we did, Jerry.
Was that there was an international conference every 2 years, and in the alternate years there were regional events, but the international conference was actually like a road show. It was offered 3 or 4 times around the world, so that you're beginning to unmute at one level, but you actually are also centralising the key messages, the research, the innovation, and the practice becomes visible everywhere. And so you also have the capacity then to attract a couple of super duper internationals who actually then go on the road for IAP2. So there's all sorts of different ways of, when you start thinking like this, that was an idea that came to me that I hadn't ever thought about until I actually started to prepare the scenario planning. And that really gives you some new ideas. Just by doing it, new things start to happen in your own head. You are only limited by your imagination.
I think we have time for one more question or comment if anyone else has something to offer.
Blair, I might just quickly then just go through some of this recommended reading. I'll only be a moment.
Absolutely.
The Living Company is a book that's probably about 10 years old now, but it's got lots of really good examples from the corporate world in this field. And the next one, they're building cross-cultural confidence, is an excellent series of case studies and information around cross-cultural environments, but also about how then you have to take different cultural phenomena into future planning that you may not have thought of if you're only working in traditionally a monocultural. Then the next one, Charles Handy, most of you all know him as a philosopher. His book, The Uncertainty, is really helpful helpful. And, you go back to these resources and you realise that they were predicting all of these things that are happening to us now with the planet and financial markets, etc. And he's really making a case for when you are doing any thinking in this field to not think about what is certain, but take into account what is uncertain, and using those as pivots for your thinking. Ringland's scenario planning is predominantly in the oil and gas field, so I'm sure many of you will know that work anyway, but it's got lots of different ways of doing scenario planning and excellent case studies which show, pick up different variables and then what they might pan out. Thingy's resource books, I'm sure most of you have used these. There's lots of fabulous little tools, ideas, very good handbooks, and one of the visioning exercises in the fifth discipline, I think, are really superb, and I've used many of them many times. Robert Theobald's work, we do have future choices. Quite often, as Lonnie quite correctly reflected, that we sort of feel a bit stuck when things aren't going so well. And he's reminding us that we always do have choices that impact on the future now. So what decisions do we make and how we make them to go forward. And for those of you who have a strong philosophical interest in these matters, I absolutely adore this book, Dana Soho and Ian Marshall's book, Spiritual Capital, where they are saying that that's really what we need to be trading in the future, spiritual capital, not just social capital or financial capital, and then how do we build the spirit of things so that they can be lasting over generations as well. Dana Zohar's a physicist originally, and it's really interesting. If those of you are familiar with her work, I'm sure you'll really enjoy that resource as well. So these are sort of the carrots and potatoes and peas and onions and things that go into the soup.
In that as well, in case anyone would like to download it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to thank all of you for coming and joining in for our second webinar. Hopefully there will be many more of these as we move into the future. It's a new technology that we're exploring, and each one seems to go a little bit smoother. I would especially like to thank you, Moira, for your time and your presentation. Very interesting presentation, I think very relevant today. I'm always happy to see engagement that is focused on the positive side of things, and this seems a tool that really keeps things upbeat, looking forward, appreciative instead of dwelling in all of the problems. Just a different way of looking at the same issues, but a less depressing, as Lonnie said, approach. And I think that's really important in this day and age, especially the last year.
Our currency is hope.
Exactly. Sometimes you just seem to be digging deeper and deeper instead of digging out of the hole. So I would